The skies above the Western Front were never truly silent. From the ground, they looked almost peaceful, pale clouds, drifting over trenches that ran like scars across France. But up there, at 10,000 feet, men hunted each other in fragile machines, stitched together from canvas and wire. They called it the new frontier of war, and its most feared inhabitant was a young Prussian nobleman with cold blue eyes and a red-painted airplane. His name was Manfred von Richthofen. To his enemies, he would become the Red Baron. To his comrades, he was simply Richthofen, the hunter. He was born on the 2nd of May, 1892, in Breslau, then part of the German Empire, a child of privilege and discipline. His father, Major Albrecht von Richthofen, was an officer in the cavalry. His mother, Kunigunde, instilled in him a rigid sense of honor. The boy grew up riding horses through the Silesian countryside, chasing deer through the forests with a rifle far too large for his hands. Even as a child, he kept score tallying every target he hit, every bird that escaped. At 11, he entered the cadet corps at Wallstatt. The training was brutal. Cold showers at dawn, endless drills, silence at meals. Yet he thrived. He wasn't the loudest or the strongest, but he was precise, methodical in every action. He once wrote to his mother, "I must be first in everything I do." It was not arrogance, it was instinct. When the First World War broke out in August 1914, Manfred von Richthofen was 22 and serving as a cavalry officer. He rode with the 1st Uhlans, a traditional unit still dressed in gleaming helmets and long blue coats. They charged across the Belgian frontier, expecting to fight battles of honor, sabers drawn, horses galloping. But the war they found was nothing like the one they had trained for. Machine guns cut down horses like wheat. Artillery turned open fields into craters. Within weeks, the cavalry, once the pride of Europe, was obsolete. Richthofen was furious. He found himself behind the lines, delivering messages, inspecting trenches, feeling wasted. "I have not yet had the chance to fire a single shot at the enemy," he wrote in frustration. He applied to join the new Fliegertruppen, the Imperial German Air Service. He had no flight experience, no training, and his superiors laughed at the idea. But persistence was another of his weapons, and by the spring of 1915, he was transferred to the skies. The early days of flight were an act of faith. Engines sputtered, wings tore under stress. Parachutes were considered cowardice. Students learned by trial and error, mostly error. Richthofen's first instructor described him as clumsy and overly cautious, yet also utterly without fear. He began as an observer, crouched in the rear seat of a reconnaissance biplane, operating a camera and a rifle. He spent hours watching the world from above, tracing trench lines, mapping artillery positions, and realizing that air power could shape entire battles. In August 1915, he finally trained as a pilot. The first time he took off alone, the wind ripped through his scarf, and he felt, as he later wrote, like a bird that has escaped its cage. By the time he joined Kampfgeschwader II, Germany's fledgling bomber wing, he had developed a reputation for precision flying. But he wanted combat, not observation. He craved the hunt. That opportunity came in September 1915, when he met Oswald Boelcke, the quiet genius who would become Germany's first great ace. Boelcke was already a legend, disciplined, analytical, and humane. He believed air combat should follow clear rules, a code of aerial chivalry. He called it Dicta Boelcke, the 8 commandments of dogfighting. Richthofen studied them obsessively. Always attack from above. Never lose sight of the enemy. Turn your head often. Always keep the sun behind you. To him, Boelcke was more than a commander. He was a craftsman of death, turning battle into art. In September 1916, Boelcke formed a new fighter squadron, Jasta 2. He handpicked his men, and among them was the young Manfred von Richthofen. The unit flew the sleek Albatros D2, a twin-gun biplane that looked fragile but could climb like a hawk. On the 17th of September, Richthofen took part in his first dogfight. He engaged a British FE-2 over Cambrai, fired, missed, and watched the enemy glide away. He was angry not at the enemy, but at himself. He had hunted since childhood. Missing was failure. Days later, on the 17th of September, he found another target, a British reconnaissance plane piloted by Lieutenant Lionel Morris. Richthofen dived from above, following Boelcke's rules exactly. He fired at close range. The enemy aircraft spiraled down and crashed behind German lines. Richthofen landed nearby to inspect the wreck. Inside, he found Morris, dying. The young British pilot was 19. Richthofen removed his leather gloves, saluted, and ordered his own men to bury him with honours. That night, he wrote in his logbook simply, "First victory." Boelcke congratulated him, reminding him to respect his opponents. "The air," Boelcke said, "is not the place for hatred, it is for skill." Richthofen never forgot those words. But the war was merciless even to its gentlemen. Weeks later, on the 28th of October, Boelcke collided mid-air with another German aircraft during combat. He crashed and died instantly. Richthofen, who had been flying nearby, saw the wreckage from above. In his diary that night, he wrote, "My teacher is dead. Now I must fight my own way." By early 1917, Richthofen was commanding Jasta 11. He was 24 years old. His squadron flew brightly coloured aircraft, each painted in distinctive patterns to identify them in the chaos of dogfights. But Richthofen's was unmistakable. He painted it entirely red. The colour was a statement. To his enemies, it announced a challenge. To his men, it was a beacon. He believed visibility inspired confidence. "Show yourself," he said, "and your enemies will know who rules the sky." The British called him the Red Devil. Newspapers dubbed him the Red Baron. His kill count climbed relentlessly. 10, 20, 30. Each victory was meticulously logged, each opponent identified by name, rank, and aircraft type. He sent pieces of downed enemy planes home as trophies, not out of cruelty, but as proof of discipline. He did not revel in bloodshed. He described air combat as a contest of nerves and geometry. He approached each dogfight like a chess problem, the angles, the speed, the light. He never fired wildly. He waited until he could see the face of the man in front of him, and then one short burst. His fame grew beyond the front lines. Postcards bore his image. Children in Berlin played with toy planes painted red. Even the British press acknowledged his skill. But fame in war is a double-edged sword. It draws both admiration and bullets. By April 1917, during what the British would call Bloody April, Richthofen had 45 confirmed kills. The Allies scrambled to stop him. Entire squadrons were ordered to get the Red Baron. He was no longer just a man. He was a symbol. That summer, the strain began to show. During a dogfight on the 6th of July 1917, a bullet grazed his skull. He managed to land, but collapsed unconscious beside his aircraft. The doctors said he was lucky to be alive. After his recovery, those who knew him noticed a change. He was quieter. The headaches persisted. The light in his eyes had dimmed. He still flew out of duty, not thrill. He told his brother Lothar, "I have the feeling my luck is running out." But orders were orders, and he returned to the front. The man who had once exuded icy confidence now moved through his squadron like a ghost. In the autumn of 1917, Major Manfred von Richthofen returned to the front, still nursing the wound that had nearly ended him. The bullet that grazed his skull had changed something fundamental. He flew with a bandaged head for weeks, headaches pounding behind his temples, his vision sometimes blurring in sharp turns. He hid it from his men. Germany needed him too much to rest. Propaganda posters bore his image. Pamphlets hailed him as the protector of the fatherland's skies. To civilians, he was a myth. To fellow pilots, an omen the crimson streak that appeared from nowhere and vanished just as quickly. Yet the myth was wearing down the man. He began to write with a melancholy tone, his once proud letters now filled with fatigue. "I am worn out," he confessed to his mother, "but the duty remains. Each flight could be my last, yet I must go." The air war had changed. New Allied aircraft, faster, stronger, with synchronized guns, had tipped the balance. The British Sopwith Camel was a match for any German fighter, and the skies were now crowded with rookies desperate for glory. Every mission felt heavier, the odds narrower. In early 1918, Richthofen was given command of Jagdgeschwader 1, a unit combining several squadrons under one emblem, the Flying Circus. Their aircraft were painted in dazzling colors, designed to move bases quickly and to strike with sudden precision. He organized them with the perfectionism of a mathematician. Every patrol had altitude limits, compass bearings, strict radio discipline. He flew at the center, the crimson heart of the machine. But despite his mastery, something had gone cold inside him. He no longer celebrated victories. Each new downed plane felt like a subtraction, not an addition. "War," he wrote in his logbook, "is not a sport anymore." The morning of the 21st of April, 1918, began like so many others, grey skies over the Somme River, mist clinging to the fields near Corby. At dawn, Richthofen climbed into his Fokker Dr. Rye triplane, serial number 425/17. It gleamed scarlet in the weak light. The paint was chipped around the cowling, oil streaks along the fuselage, a veteran's machine, not a showpiece. He was 25 years old, with 80 confirmed victories, the highest of any pilot in the war. The Baron buttoned his coat, adjusted his leather gloves, and nodded to his ground crew. There was no speech, no drama, just ritual. The engine coughed, then roared. He lifted off into the low clouds. Across the lines, the Australian and British squadrons of the Royal Air Force were already in the air. Among them was Captain Arthur Roy Brown, a Canadian flying a Camel, and his young friend Wilfred Wop May on his first combat mission. They spotted a German reconnaissance plane and dived to attack. Moments later, red wings flashed through the mist. Richthofen entered the fight like lightning fast, precise, terrifyingly controlled. He targeted May, the rookie, and followed him down through the cloud layer, firing short bursts. May weaved desperately, his machine shuddering. Brown saw his friend in trouble and plunged after them, trying to distract the crimson predator. Below, the Somme countryside opened into patchwork fields and winding trenches. The three aircraft swooped so low that soldiers on the ground looked up from their rifles in astonishment. The Red Baron was now less than 300 feet above the earth, breaking his own rules. "Never chase an enemy too far behind their lines," Boelcke had once warned. But in that moment, instinct overruled doctrine. He pursued May across the river, unaware that dozens of Australian machine gunners below had seen the red plane and opened fire. Tracer rounds stitched the air around him. Richthofen fired again, missing by inches. He banked left to climb, and then it happened. A single bullet struck him beneath the right arm, passing through his chest. He stiffened, the triplane wobbled, then leveled for a heartbeat. He managed to land in a beet field near the village of Vaux-sur-Somme. Farmers and soldiers ran toward the crimson machine as its propeller slowed and stopped. By the time they reached it, the Red Baron was slumped forward, still strapped into his seat. His final word was a whisper, "Caput." The man who had ruled the skies was gone. When the British troops realized who they had found, they fell silent. Lieutenant Donald Fraser, one of the first to approach, later wrote, "We saw the red triplane lying there like a fallen bird. The pilot was dead, his face calm. We did not feel triumph, only awe. They carried his body with care, laying him beneath a tarpaulin. Officers from the Royal Flying Corps identified him by the silver ring on his finger and the faint initials on his flight jacket. That night, in a field hospital near Bertangles, they prepared his funeral. The next morning, on the 22nd of April, 1918, 6 British officers stood at attention as Richthofen was buried with full military honours. A wreath on his coffin read, "To our gallant and worthy foe." Bugles played, rifle volleys cracked through the still air. The Union Jack covered his casket. When the last salute echoed away, even the men who had shot at him felt the strange quiet of respect. The news spread across the front like fire. For one day, the war paused, not officially, but in the minds of men who had watched courage meet fate. The Red Baron had fallen, but he had done so without dishonor. Back in Germany, the announcement of his death struck like thunder. Berlin newspapers printed his portrait bordered in black. The Kaiser ordered a state funeral. Crowds lined the streets as his coffin, draped in the imperial flag, rolled through under grey skies. Atop the casket rested a wreath from his mother. She had written only 2 words: "Mein Sohn," my son. In the months that followed, his name became legend. To the Allies, he was the noble enemy, the last knight of the air. To Germany, he was a martyr of the fatherland. His face appeared on stamps, his red triplane on postcards and model kits long after the armistice. But the truth of Manfred von Richthofen was more fragile than any myth. He was not a bloodthirsty killer, nor a hero molded from propaganda. He was a young man raised to obey, trapped in a war that glorified obedience until it consumed him. His journals reveal no joy in killing, only precision, duty, and a creeping weariness. In one of his final writings, he confessed, "The soldier does not fight because he hates what is before him, but because he loves what is behind him." He never lived to see the war end. When the guns finally fell silent that November, the red triplane was already a relic, a symbol of a world that had believed war could still have rules. Today, the name Red Baron has outlived the man. It has become shorthand for daring and mastery, printed on comic books, aircraft, even frozen pizzas. But behind the commercial legend lies something quieter: the story of how technology and honor collided in the sky, and how one man tried to reconcile both. His aircraft, the Fokker Dr. I, stands preserved in museums, its bright red wings faded to rust. His grave rests now in Wiesbaden, far from the fields of France. Each year, aviators leave small tokens, propeller pins, flight wings, letters. They are reminders that even in the machinery of war, humanity can still see itself reflected. In the end, Manfred von Richthofen was not defined by his 80 victories, nor by his crimson paint. He was defined by the contradiction at his core, a hunter who never learned to love the kill, a soldier who still believed in honor, even as the world around him forgot what that word meant. When the wind rises over the Somme and the clouds move like ghosts, those who look up might still imagine the red streak of his triplane against the grey sky, not as a symbol of death, but as the last trace of chivalry before the modern world took flight.